Hello, everybody. It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We have reached yet another Friday, so of course, you know that means I have another set of film recommendations all ready for you. Yesterday was Earth Day, and I thought this would be the absolute perfect time to present a set of really targeted recommendations that all have eco-mindedness and environmental friendliness as themes. These films are all really fantastic, critically acclaimed documentaries, and I think cover a really fascinating, broad range of topics within that whole environmental concern. Now, as always, these movies are available entirely free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, and they're available on our 3 video services, which are CleveNet's Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and Canopy. So without any further ado, I want to go ahead and jump right into these recs. Okay, I only have one recommendation from CleveNet's Overdrive this week, but this documentary is very, very interesting. It's called In Organic We Trust, and it actually poses a ton of really fascinating questions about the organic industry that we are kind of living in now. Um, Definitely has a point of view, which let's be honest, all documentaries really do for the most part these days. Um, but regardless of how you feel about organic goods, it definitely wants you to ask very specific questions. And, I actually now find myself thinking about some of the points that were posed in this quite frequently. Um, it starts talking about, just the produce industry in America in general. And then it moves on to, what does it mean to be organic? When you see the little organic, a certified organic sticker on, an apple or on a package of carrots at the grocery store, exactly what does that mean? Does that mean it's good for you specifically, or does it just mean it was grown in a certain way? Does it mean that it's grown in a way that is good for the planet? Does it mean, there's so many levels to that question. And, in general, I think someone like me doesn't necessarily think about that beforehand, all of those different levels. I just looked for, oh, it's organic. I know ABC about it. And I think that's how a lot of us are. So this one really has made me kind of think a little bit about what different phrases and like official words mean. Is a certified organic, let's say cabbage, better for you and the environment than one that you can pick up at a local farm stand market? It's definitely one of those films that is designed to sort of jumpstart you to get out of a rut. And it really is quite fascinating, the discussion that's in the film itself. And I definitely would encourage anybody who is thinking about both eating healthier and eating in a way that is encouraging sustainable growth for like the food industry in general, farming industry, agriculture. It's just really, really kind of an eye-opening documentary, I think, in a lot of ways, especially if you're already not thinking in certain directions as far as organic food goes. Anyway, it's a very fast watch and really, really interesting regardless of how you feel about organic food. But yeah, definitely recommended. Again, Inorganic We Trust, CleveNet. Make sure you make time to watch that one. All right, moving right along to our Hoopla digital recommendations. The first one I've got for you there is a documentary called The Organic Life. Now, this one is a documentary that has a lot of personality to it because it's a film that follows the life of Austin, this sort of baby organic farmer, if that makes sense. He's just starting out in that particular industry, and he really has so many ideals, and it definitely watches like a dramatic movie as opposed to a documentary in a lot of ways. The way that the storytelling happens, it feels much more like a biopic than I would say your standard documentary. And I love those, the ones that really breathe life into a subject. And this does such a good job of that. Um, you have your main character, Austin. He's that idealistic, just starting out organic farmer. You have his very skeptical girlfriend, whose name is Casey, who is wondering if this is a good idea at all, like to put all your chips in on this kind of far-fetched dream of the way agriculture works. And it also sort of chronicles just like small farm living, like what that means, what it can entail. And obviously, not all small farms are the same. In fact, none of them are going to be. But just getting that little snapshot of what this young man's life is like is really interesting, especially for those of us who, you know, don't have that much familiarity with small farm living. Um, the other thing that it does a really good job of is sort of illustrate not just the people who are growing our food, but the process that they go through in order to get the food to us. So you see that growth period, you see harvest, you see shipment, you see all of the different steps, which I think a lot of us miss out on. You know, we know that seeds are germinated, we know that plants grow, we know that eventually these plants end up on a dinner plate, but what are all the steps in between those? And I really liked the way that this laid things out. Again, because it gives so much life and color to the subject, it really feels like you're totally immersed in this little world. Um, it definitely touches on the concept of sustainable farming and what that means for uh, agriculture today. You know, how can you make something sustainable? How can you make something responsible? Um, when producing foods for the masses, where is the line between profitability, responsibility, sustainability, all of those different elements? How do they come together a in a way that is good for everyone? And again, this movie does a great job of showing that by being so personal, by being kind of this intimate portrait of a young man. So the organic life on Hoopla, definitely a great watch for people who love biopics, for people who are interested in small farms and who are curious about sustainability. Those are this one's a really great one for those things. My other Hoopla recommendation is for a film called Earth Days, which actually kind of traces the history of Earth Day. Um, I'm in general like a history fan. Like I love movies that sort of talk about events and the way things lead up to situations, and this is so fascinating as far as that goes. um this one traces like political background, but just historical background in general. Like it traces the lives of certain scientists who sort of made a big push for the whole Earth Day movement in general and an environmental movement in general. It definitely talks about, how we got to where we are today with regard to different bills that had to move through the system in order to change the way that we were looking at the environment and at environmental protection. Um, this one also looks at, you know, both the successes and the failures of the environmental movement. And I really do appreciate that. When documentaries have an agenda, they're almost always going to lean one way or the other, right? But this one, it does do an excellent job of sort of fleshing out why certain things failed and how it's not always the other's fault that things fail. Like sometimes the originating source can be the reason that a movement or an action doesn't work out. And it doesn't shy away from those elements. It interviews a ton of people who were initially involved in that first movement to really get the public involved in environmental policy. And it's so interesting to hear those people speak, some of whom are as passionate about this as they were, you would assume, back when the movement began in the first place. So if you are a history buff, if you are interested in politics, if you are interested in science, this one is a really, really good one. Like I said, it does brush a wide swath through the topic, and through all of the years of the movement in general. And I think this one's a great one for people who maybe don't have very much familiarity with Earth Day and how it started. It is a really, really good sort of primer for that kind of topic in general, too, in addition to being interesting for people who are, already informed, just because you've got all of those rather personal interviews with a lot of the who's who from that particular era. I thought that was a lot of fun, actually. Like these names that I'd read in books and in magazine articles, I saw them on screen, and that's really, really interesting to be able to witness people that you admire or have written papers about or find interesting, to be able to actually watch them on your TV screen is a really cool thing. So Earth Day is also available on Hoopla. Excellent, excellent choice. So as always, our last set of recommendations all come from our Canopy service, and the first of those is a documentary called Seed, The Untold Story. Now, if you watch no other documentary on this list, you should 100% watch Seed. I actually screened this at the library a couple of years ago, and everybody who watched it was really interested. It's one of those documentaries that certainly has a point of view, but will grab you regardless of how much familiarity you have with this topic, which is seed conservation and just the state of seed varieties in the world in general. This is something I had very little familiarity with, beyond like your basic, heirloom seeds and like standard variety seeds, things like that. I have grown plants before, but I did not know sort of all about how all of these smaller varieties are being wiped out, why that is, what people are doing to fight back against it. And while this film absolutely has a point of view and a specific direction it wants you to look at, political ramifications of this particular situation, it, I think, strives to be really pretty open and honest about the realities of what's going on with seeds. The other thing that I really loved about this is it gives so much color to the people who are really working to preserve seeds, and their passion 100% bleeds through. Why is it important that certain seeds are not allowed to die out? Why is it important that certain seeds are not allowed to be crossed with others? It's just topics that I never would have thought about prior to this particular film. And they talk to a wide range of people. It's not just like, those who are super involved with the movement itself, but it talks to farmers, it talks to scientists, it talks to lawyers who are involved in like legal ramifications of, say, big companies like Monsanto versus, your everyday farmer, things like that. Um, it covers the loss of seeds and the cultural impacts of that, which I would never have thought about prior to this film either. You know, the loss of certain like ceremonial seeds that go along with indigenous people. I mean, there's a huge amount of history with this particular movement, with the seed conservation movement. Um, and whether or not you know anything about the topic when you start, you 100% will be interested enough to maybe look it up afterward, which is exactly what I did. And that's kind of the whole point. It's to grab your attention, it's to make you want to at least ask questions about seed conservation. And regardless of how you fall, again, opinion wise, this one is a great one just because I think anytime we're encouraged as a group to have a conversation, to ask questions about topics that we might not know about, it's always a good thing. So, yes, if you have any interest in seed conservation, if you have interest in politics, in history, in gardening, even just plain gardening at all, Seed: The Untold Story is a fantastic and fascinating documentary. So please do check that one out. My next recommendation from Canopy is for a award-winning short called Straws, and this one is just, I think, 30 minutes, and it just sort of talks about plastic pollution in waterways and oceans, specifically disposable plastic straws. Now, I use glass straws and metal straws and bamboo straws. I try and stay away from the plastic format as much as humanly possible. But, you know, to see all the reasons why, I think lends much more weight to certain decisions that we make. And this does a very good job in a short amount of time of explaining what that sort of accumulation of plastic does to waterways. How is a straw such an issue? What makes it so problematic? And this does a great job of illustrating all of those elements. It's narrated by Tim Robbins, who has a great voice. He narrates quite a few documentaries, actually. And even just the opening of this one, like I said, it's super short. So even just the opening, which is like this really cool little animated segment, is done very well, and it's designed to sort of grab you and keep your interest. So I would say this one is great even for, you know, teens and below who are interested in environmental concepts and what you and kids with whom you want to start conversations with regard to pollution and what we can do about what we can do about that for the earth. So Straws, award-winning short, available on Canopy. Now, my very last documentary is for a film called River Blue, and this one is another one just like Seed. I find really fascinating and totally gripping. It really focuses in on the environmental concerns and ramifications of the fashion industry in particular. Not an industry, in all honesty, that I generally have a huge amount of interest in. You know, beyond buying like a nice sweater, I don't really think necessarily about all of the different elements of the industry. And this one really takes a look at things like blue jeans and what connection that has to do with the environment. What does the process of creating a denim jean have to do with environmentalism? And this documentary does a fantastic job of illustrating what that connection is. It talks to a number of scientists, in particular a Mark Angelo, who is an international river conservationist, and it does a really great job of illustrating how elements of an industry we're all part of, we all wear clothes, how when we are people who, like me, don't really think of all the different steps, how we aren't helping a situation that could be helped. Um, it really is kind of, again, one of those eye-opening documentaries that at least encourages you to have conversations about the way things are run, the way things that are done. And I can't recommend this one enough. It definitely has me thinking about clothing sustainability in a different way. Certainly, I'm looking more at labels. I'm looking more at, you know, sort of the concept of thrifting, things, making things much more sustainable and long lasting than I did before. Um, and I mean, if nothing else, that's a fantastic sort of push for people. I would say that this documentary does an excellent job of encouraging people to sort of follow through with that way of approaching an industry that, again, we are all a part of, whether or not we think we are a part of it. So if you have any interest in fashion, if you have any interest in mindfulness, I think is a really good way to put it. If you have any interest in sort of the history of an ever-present sort of industry in general, River Blue, available on Canopy, fantastic documentary. Now, those are the 6 recommendations that I have for this week. If you have any recommendations about documentaries that have to do with eco-mindedness, environmental friendliness, things like that, please, please, please recommend them. I think we'd all be interested in seeing more recs about that. Especially, I tried to stay away from the films that have more to do about nature, just because I've recommended a ton of those in the past. And there are so many of those available on all 3 services. So if you are more of an animal-minded and animal lover, make sure you check out our services for those as well. If you have any recommendations for future topics, as always, I am always more than happy to read over those as well. So just comment, let me know. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope everybody has an excellent week ahead. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye, and we will see you next time. Bye.